Hello everyone and welcome to Beginner's Code. Today we are going to learn how we can use Flask to create a text-based Hangman game that is played in your browser. Okay, so I've created a folder called Hangman and I'm just going to create a virtual environment. So what we'll do is we'll say Python 3-m venv and we'll just call it myenv. And whilst that's happening, we will then say source myenv bin activate, and now we will have myenv activated. So now we want to install Flask and requests. So whilst that's happening, I'll come back over to my Hangman folder in Visual Studio Code. We'll create a templates and we will also create a static. Now inside the static, we'll just say styles.css. And inside the templates, we'll say index.html. And then outside of all of these, we will have an app.py. So make sure the app.py is in the Hangman folder and not inside static or templates. Okay, so now we will just make sure that this is all done. Perfect. So if we want to start, we need to start importing Flask and make sure that the servers are actually running correctly. So we'll say from Flask, import Flask. We're going to be using render template. We'll also use request for like form submissions. We use session to store the actual data, redirect, and URL for. And we will also import requests. So now we can create an instance of our app. So we'll say Flask or app is equal to Flask, and we'll pass in __ name. And we are just going to give it a secret key, and this can be whatever you want it to be. So I'll just call it test environment. And now at the bottom of all of this, we need to have if name is double equal to main, and then we will have app.run, and we'll pass in debug and we'll set that equal to true. Okay, so now if we want to just make sure that the server's actually up and running, we will do a root. So we'll say app.root and we'll pass in /, and this will just be the very first instance of our URL. So it will be localhost /, and that will be the home page, or this root. So we'll say def index, and here we'll just return render template, and we'll pass in index.html. Now in the index.html, we will just output hello world. And if we come back over to our terminal and we say Python 3 app.py, you'll now see that we have a development server up and running. So if I copy this and I head over to Google Chrome, we now have Hello World outputting. So the development server is up and running on 127.0.0.1 with a port of 5000. This is standard by Flask, you can change this. But if we come back over to here and we remove the hello world from our index.html, the first thing that we want to do is we want to actually have a way of generating a random word. Now for this, we are going to use an API, and it's just random word API. It's a Heroku app. So what we'll do is we'll create a constant and we'll say API URL, and we'll set this equal to the string of HTTPS random-word-API .heroku app.com, and we'll say word, and we'll pass in a query string, so we'll say number is equal to 1. So this will just get one random word from the API. So now we need to actually create a function to get this random word. So we'll say def get random word, and then we'll say response is equal to requests.get, and we'll pass in API URL. And then we'll say if response.status code is equal to 200, then we will return response.json, and then we'll just get the first index of it, or the 0 index, and we'll just make sure that it's all uppercase. Now we will, if it's not 2000, so if this hasn't run, then it will just return none. So this is a way of basically showing an error. So now we have this function and a way of actually getting it. We need to create or enhance on our index function to get different things depending on what's happening. Now we want to store everything in a session because it's an easier way for us to actually access the data and how many guesses they've had and what how many misses they've had and what letters they've actually guessed. So inside this, we'll just say if, and then we'll say word is not in session, then we will create some sessions. So we'll say session, and we'll create a key of word. So if there is no word created, then we are going to get a random word. So this will call this function here. Then we'll say session guesses, and we'll set that equal to an empty list because there haven't been any guesses yet. And then we'll say session, and we'll say misses, and that will be equal to 0 because again there haven't been any guesses. And then we'll say session and message, and this will just be an empty string because we'll be changing the string at a later date. So now if that's all happened, we will then say word display, and we'll set that equal to an empty string dot join. And then here we're going to use this comprehension, and we'll say letter if letter in session guesses, else underscore for letter in session word. So this is basically going to create, say the word is 5 letters long, so you'll have 5 underscores for each letter in the session. But if the letter is in the guesses, so say one of these is an A, then it will output like that. So now we have this word display. We now need to actually pass it back to the index.html. So here we just need to pass some variables. So we'll say word underscore display is equal to word underscore display. And then we'll say guesses is equal to session and guesses. So this is going to get the number of guesses, the guesses that they've had in terms of what letter it actually is. And then we'll say misses, and this will be session misses, and this will be the number of misses that they've had. So if they have tried 4 letters and all of them are wrong, then this will show 4. And then we'll say message is equal to session.get, and then here we'll pass in message, and then we will also pass in a second parameter of just an empty string. Okay, so now we have this. This should output depending on different things. So if we were to come back over to our HTML and we were to just output word display. So in here, we just said word underscore display. We should, if I spell session correctly, session guesses. So come back over to here and we change this one. So now we have an X amount of underscores. So I can't actually tell how many underscores that is, but we have underscores being outputted, which means we have a word, which is perfect. Just to double check that we have a word, we can always say here we can just pass in word is equal to session word, and then here we'll just change this to word, So now we have modus, okay, so this is being stored in the sessions, so it's going to be the same one until the session has been deleted. So until we have a reset function, it's going to be displaying the same word. So because of that, let's create a reset function. So we'll say app.root, and here we'll just pass in reset. And then we'll say def reset. And here we're just going to remove all of the sessions from the session. So we'll say session.pop, we'll say word, and then we'll just give it a parameter of none. And then we'll paste this 4 times. We'll change this one to say guesses, this one to say misses, and this one to say message. And then we will return a redirect URL for, and we'll just pass in index. So once this is done and someone's clicked on the reset button, we will be sent back to the index.html. So if I create a tag, and then we just pass in reset, and in here we just say URL for, and then we pass in reset. This should allow us to reset the sessions. So if I refresh, we have reset, pipe stem, reset, overvoted, reset, prelims. Okay, so we have a working reset button, which is perfect. So now we want to handle the guesses and how many guesses a user has had. So we'll say app.root, and we will use the URL of guesses. We'll actually make it guess, but we then need to pass in methods, and this is just going to be a post method. So we'll say def guess, and then we'll say guess is equal to request.form, and we'll pass in guess, and we'll make it uppercase because we are getting a word in uppercase. So whatever the letter is, we want to check it against this letter, and if it's the same or it's in it, then we will essentially have it correct, but we can't check a lowercase to an uppercase because it would be incorrect. So next we'll say if guess not in session guesses. So if you've not already guessed the letter B, for example, next we will say session guesses dot append, and then we will just pass in the guess that they have actually guessed. And then we'll say if guess in session word, we're going to create a new message. So we'll say session message, and this will be equal to an f string saying good guess. And then we'll pass in the guess, and we'll say is in the word. If we put this into speech marks, it will make it a little bit clearer when you're actually getting that back, that A is in the word rather than just saying like A is in the word. Next, we will create an else. So if it's not in the word, we're going to add to the misses. So session misses plus equals 1. And then we'll output a new message. So we'll say message is equal to F. We'll say sorry. And then again, we'll pass that into parentheses, speech marks. We'll say guess is not in the word. And now we want to handle whether or not it's actually in the session guesses. So if it is in the session guesses, we'll say session message, and we'll say an f string of you already guessed, and pass in guess. So now that that's all happened, we then, outside of this if block, we want to return a redirect, and we'll just say URL for, and here we'll pass in index. So this is keeping everything on the same page without using JavaScript, for example, to handle the AJAX calls. We are literally doing this all through links and redirects. So it won't be asynchronous, but it will be a one-page web app. So now we have our app basically handled. We have the logic for it. If we come over to our index.html, and we can remove these now, and I can actually remove the word here. So we'll get rid of that. And then here we'll just create a HTML5 boilerplate. We'll call it Hangman. And then in here, we want to create a div with a class of container. We'll create a heading one called Hangman Game. And then here we'll say the word, and we'll say word display. So that will output the underscores. Here we'll say guesses, and this will output the guesses that they've had in a list. Here we'll say misses, and this will output the number of misses that they've had. And then we will just output the message. So this isn't going to be the most user-friendly in terms of like the style and how good it looks. It's not going to include the basic Hangman drawing either. It's just going to be a text-based game really. So now here we can use Ginger syntaxing, and we can actually handle whether or not it's working, and we can output different things depending on what has happened. So we'll say if underscore not in word display, so if there's no underscores, and then we'll say else if misses is greater than or equal to, we'll say 8, just to make things a little bit nicer, because obviously if it's a 7-letter word, you don't want to be guessing too many times, but you want to have enough that there is a bit of leeway. And then we'll just say else, and we'll create an end if just to end the if statements. So now in here, we'll create a p tag, and we'll say congratulations, you won. We'll create an a tag with a href that says play again. And then in here, we will pass in URL4, and here we will say reset, because we want to reset the page. We don't want to keep the sessions there, we want to remove the sessions, because even if you refresh the page, the sessions will still be there. Now, otherwise, if the misses are greater than or equal to 8, so if they've had 8 misses, then we'll say sorry, you lost. The word was, and then here we'll say session.word. So we can access all these session attributes just using that. In essence, I suppose we probably didn't need to pass them all through like this. We could have just done index.html and then here accessed everything through sessions. But it's always good to know that you can pass things through using render template. So next we will say a href, and we'll say try again, because obviously if you lost, you want to try again. And then we'll say URL4 and reset again, just because then they'll have a different word. And then otherwise, so this will handle how it will look when you are playing, just any ordinary game. So we'll create a form, and the action will be URL4, and this will be guess. So every time you press or submit the form, it's going to redirect to the guess function and then output that all in the browser. And we'll say method post, and then here we're just going to create an input of text. We'll give it a name of guess, and we'll say max length, and we'll give that equal to 1. We'll remove the ID, but we will give it a required attribute, so you can only submit the form if there is 1 letter typed in. Obviously, if you wanted to handle this a little bit better, you'd make sure that they were only typing in a letter or making sure that they weren't typing in punctuation, for example. But that is something that you can take from this and you can adapt it to make it your own. You can do it through the JavaScript, and you can also handle the validation through the Python file. So now we'll just create a submit button and we'll say guess. So at the top here, we just want to link to our styles.css. So we'll say URL for, passing static, and then we'll say file name, and that will be styles.css. And now if we come back to Google Chrome and refresh, we now have a very, very, very basic Hangman game, which if I press A, that's not right. A is not in the word. There's a little spelling mistake. A is not in the word. So now if you see I refresh, it keeps the guesses and the misses. So we'll say C, B, E. So now we have a letter outputted, and you'll know that there are three misses, but there are 4 actual letters. So now if I try E again, we say you already guessed E. So now we have a fully functioning Hangman game, to be honest. We just need to give it a little bit of styling. It's only going to be very basic because obviously it is just a text-based one. So we'll say body, and this will be font family. We'll say Arial and sans serif. We'll say a background color of F4, 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 which will be a grey. Margin 0 and padding 0. And this will just reset all the padding that comes built in with browsers. Then say container, width 50%, margin auto, and this will centralize everything. Overflow hidden, and we'll give a padding top of 20 pixels. We'll then say heading 1, and we'll say text align center. We'll give a pre, just in case anything's outputted in a pre. We'll say font size 20 pixels and text align center. And then we'll use the p tag. We'll also say font size 20 pixels, text align center. So what we can actually do, because these are the same, is we can say pre, comma, p, and then remove these. And then we'll say form, text align center, just to keep everything centered. And we'll give it a margin top of 20 pixels. We'll now want to do the inputs. So input type, and we'll say text. And this will be padding of 10 pixels all around and a font size of 16 pixels. We'll say button, padding 10 pixels by 20 pixels, so 10 pixels top and bottom, 20 pixels to the right and left. Font size of 16 pixels, background color of 333, which will be a darker grey. And then we'll say color of FFF, which will be white. Border none, so that will reset the border. And then cursor, we want to set to pointer, so that it has the little hand icon when you hover over it. We'll then say A, we'll say display block, we'll say text align center, margin top of 20 pixels, text decoration we'll say none, so that will remove the underline. We'll say color 333, so that matches the button. And then font size of 20 pixels. And we're just going to give the A hover. So we'll say text decoration and we'll say underline. So now when you hover over the A tag, it will actually have a underline there. So now if I continue and I just say I, L, B, G, W, N. Just don't actually know what this word could be. K, D, prelims. So now we have a try again button that when you hover over it, it actually is coloured in. So now if I click that, we have it all refresh and we get a new word. So now we'll start with A. So A is in the word. R, P, I, G, K, C. We'll go for W. And then finally, if this is wrong, I've lost again. So M. The word was Tolan. Hopefully this has helped you grasp how we can use Python logic and Flask to create a one-page web app that incorporates sessions to remember what has happened during the game. If you learned something today, please hit that like button and make sure you subscribe to see new videos coming. Thanks, and I'll see you again soon.